Welcome to Sharks, Snakes, and Shareholders, an Innovators Uncensored show where startup founders and entrepreneurs share their horror stories of shady term sheets, toxic boardrooms, and investors you wish you declined. Each week, we'll have a new guest, ranging from angel investors and VCs to deal makers and founders, who will rank each of these horror stories on our investor red flag scale. Hosted by ShipShape.VC's very own Daniel Salko.
Hi, I'm Daniel Safko. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ShipShape.VC, a free-to-use investment search engine that enables founders to identify which investors they should be speaking with about the technology that they're building. We're really pleased about this show because it helps founders identify the horror stories that other founders have gone through without needing to repeat the same mistakes themselves. And this week, our guest is Andrew McGlashan.
Hello.
It's really nice to have sort of the shoe on the other foot, and me getting to ask you questions. So for those who don't know, so Andrew is our lawyer at Acuity, so it's quite fun to to have this dynamic.
You're going to get your own back now, aren't you?
Yeah. So yeah, just very quickly for the uninitiated, the new listeners. What we have is some anonymized founder stories of horror stories that they've encountered in their sort of journeys and travels in the ecosystem. And we'll go through those stories. We'll go through some analysis. And Rich has prepared for us some lovely color cards with different rankings for how bad we think that these investors are. So we've got oddball alert.
Mm-hmm.
We've got backseat founder. So those investors that sort of are going to come in and try and run the business. Boardroom vampire, so they're just draining the lifeblood out of the business through their presence. And then finally, business butcher.
Yeah.
So the idea being that if you accept terms like these, your business is dead. So yeah, those are traffic lights, so to speak.
Yeah. No. Okay. Understood.
Brilliant. Okay. So. Actually, before we get cracking on the stories, if you're prepared to disclose, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, go on.
What's the worst situation that you've seen a company be in with regards to investor behavior?
Well, there's been a few. The worst. I've had it where they have basically said to the founders, we basically need to move this to Italy. So it was an investment round. They didn't have many options. These guys came in, said, yeah, we invest in early stage companies. These are our term sheets. And then it quickly transpired that actually, yeah, they'll invest this money, but we need to start a presence in Italy and have an Italian holdco. And, you can still operate from the UK if you want, but eventually we need to be looking at moving this to Italy.
Wow.
Which they didn't accept. But I had some sympathy because if you have nothing else on the table at the time and you believe in what you're doing, you will look at anything to try and get the money in to make it work. I just think it was a big miscommunication at the start and they didn't realize the Italian angle to it, which I don't know if it was deliberate or not, because it's a pretty big, ridiculous thing to not have understanding of. But I was asked to sort of have a quick look at the term sheet when it came across, and third paragraph at the end was sort of, and you have to set up an Italian presence. There'll be an Italian holdco.
So like Lake Como, somewhere
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it could have, it could have benefits to it. There's worse places to have to move to, but just wasn't on the founder's radar. And then, it obviously didn't get away as a result of it. But, you see terms about, equity dilution and pricing, etc. But, that was the first time I said, no, we're going to Italy, guys. So yeah, that one was one of the most surprising ones I've come across recently anyway. Maybe not the worst, but the most surprising.
Now, obviously, you see a lot of deals, both with public and private investors. Was this a private investor or was it public?
Yeah, no, it was just that it turned out that they were linked to the Italian government in some form or way, or their funding was linked. So they had to have that presence in Italy to sort of justify the fees. It's just that it got to I don't know how it got to such an advanced stage of talks without that being like the number one thing you probably talk about. It was, So yeah, like I said, I don't know if it was deliberate on their part or not, but the founder and I had to talk about it and just thought, I probably can't do this. He thought about it, but yeah, didn't get away on that one.
Wow. Okay. That is, not had that one before, but
Yeah,
that's,
I was trying to think of what the most surprising, necessarily the worst, but yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Right. So first founder story, and we'll get into it. So investor offers 150K via convertible loan note, and actually, you can put you on the spot again. Could you provide the definition of a convertible loan note for our listeners?
Definition of a convertible loan note. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got convertible loan notes, and then you've got advanced subscription agreements or SAFEs, as depending on if you're using UK or US parlance. The convertible loan note is, I'll give you some money now. We'll agree an interest rate on that, typically. That interest rate runs on the background, and then you set some parameters around how that may or may not convert into equity down the line. So it could stay as a loan note, and you just repay the loan, and whoever's granting you the loan note, may never get shares. Typically, though, they probably will convert, and the loan note should probably have provisions in there to govern how that converts, at what price, which is why convertible loan notes, and if you're raising SEIS or EIS, you've got to be careful about the sort of lots of. I'm sure anyone watching or listening to this knows that there's so many ways you can trip up on SEIS and EIS, and convertible loan notes are certainly one of them.
Great. Thank you for that definition. Okay, so investor offered us a 150K convertible loan note.
Yeah.
Conditional on a total round size of 300,000, so double the loan note, and the interest rate was set at 10%.
There we go.
The investor proposed that the pre-money valuation would be the lower of 500,000 or a 20% discount to the fair value agreed at the time.
God, this is like maths GCSEs, isn't it? This?
So what we're talking about there is rather than setting a floor for the value of the round and you add in equity on top, they're setting a ceiling and saying that all of the additional equity. Sorry, you're not creating additional equity. You're working within those confines. So
Yeah.
a 300,000 investment would be 60% of the company at a 500K ceiling,
Valuation, yeah.
which, I mean,
It's aggressive.
going to ask a knowing question.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen these types of terms before?
Well, no. The basic sort of parameters of what we're talking about, yes, that's. And again, the thing I have sympathy for when all founders sort of have these things is you're only, your negotiating power is only as good as how many investors you're talking to and willing to do this. So I have some sympathy that if this is the only deal in town, why you would potentially look at that. But I think it's very expensive money, and also I don't know if they're existing shareholders in terms of it's just the founders or they have had some money in shareholders, but the dilution aspect of it is going to be very difficult going forward to look attractive to future investors on that. I'd like to think they've maybe done some worked examples to show like what potentially. I'm a big fan of worked examples. Before you sign anything, just actually plot out, right, okay, this is what it says in words, but actually in reality, what's this going to look like? And what are we as founder or founders going to have as a result? And also bear in mind, you've got a 10% interest rate ticking along in the background as well, which just adds adds salt to the wound, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely massive. Okay, and yeah, I really like the idea of doing worked examples and running through those scenarios. Is it? I mean, I've got to admit, I've not seen a sort of a maximum cap in this sort of way as a post money valuation.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said again. It's do we know? Do we know if this was accepted or just proposed?
I think this was just proposed.
Just proposed. Yeah.
I think so.
Again, but I mean, I guess it's again if they only. I think from my perspective, if I was advising these guys, I would be saying, right, what are you realistically looking at your valuation of your next round? When it comes to it, what's your valuation going to be? And presumably this was absolutely miles off of it. You never know the ins and outs of it, right? But I think, that's. I wouldn't say this is commonplace by any means. I think you've got a really aggressive investor just trying to take advantage of the situation by the sounds of it.
And you mentioned earlier about dilution. Like are you happy to go into sort of what that so dilution obviously is just where the percentage ownership drops as you issue sort of new equity or new investors are coming in. Why is that so important for future rounds?
Yes. So a number of reasons. I think the main one being, if you're looking to attract future investment, so you do this round, it's on unfavorable terms, let's say. The difficulty you have when you get to your next round then is the investors will say, right, well, what's your share cap table at the moment and what's it going to look like post our investment if you're asking us for $1 million, 2 million, whatever it is.
And why do they care about that?
Because if your founders are, let's say, after their investment round owning 20% of the company, it's not very incentivizing for them to actually carry on when they've got such a small percentage of it. You want to incentivize them to have the lion's share of it still, to keep going, to keep building, and knowing that the returns of it are mainly going to go to them. It's a bit demoralizing if your founder's putting all this time and effort into it and you've got 20% of the business and everyone else owns the 80% between them. You're earning psychologically, you're earning for other people almost, although you're obviously earning a bit for yourself. So it was always a major thing when investors come in the bigger rounds. And that's what you've got to be thinking about. If we, or I as a founder, dilute too much now, I'm going to look very unattractive down the line to future investors. And again, I have sympathy because some people just want to say, I need the money now. There's not going to be a future fundraising round if I don't get the money now because there'll be no business. So I don't envy founders who are in that position, but you just have to do it with your eyes wide open that if you get massively diluted at this stage, down the line, you're going to get even more problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. when I saw that, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah. I'm glad it was just proposed.
Yeah, me too. But evidently the investors think that they can get money accepted on those terms.
They'll be trying it until you don't ask, don't get, right? But presumably they've had that accepted and are going to keep going with it, sort of thing. But yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, I would not want to be in one of the portfolio companies or two and invest it into that fund because I can't imagine what the returns are going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you're right about the investors in the funds as well because, they don't get talked about that much because you're usually dealing with the founders and then you've got whoever's leading the round on the fund, right? But yeah, I think it's just a bad news story for everyone, really, because no one's thinking long term there at all.
Yeah, that seems extremely harsh.
Yeah,
very sharky.
Very sharky. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know how I'm going to vote on this one. I think we might be in an agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one are we?
I go with. Butcher.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Too much butchering going on there.
Yeah, that would be an unfundable business in future. Okay, brilliant. Right, that's round one.
Yeah, nice. Easing into it, lovely.
Yeah.
Ready for the next one.
Okay, right. There are some more numbers involved here,
okay.
so
I
apologies.
should have brought my calculator, but that's fine.
And then in future, maybe we'll put it up on the screen.
Maybe I have an abacus there or something. Right?
Yeah.
Do they still make abacuses? I don't even know. I'm showing my age now. As 38-year-old.
Right. Okay. We had 120,000 investment offer, setting the post-money value, another post-money valuation, setting the post-money valuation at 1.5 million. The investor wants to take an investment fee of 5%, along with an annual 2% monitoring fee. They required a board seat, and the company that was receiving the investment had to bear all legal costs, even if the deal didn't close, with no cap on legal fees beyond the initial 2,500 plus VAT that had been estimated. On top of this, they required that the investor...
Anything else?
Yeah, no,
it keeps going, right?
There's more. There's more. There's a sort of an a la carte where any one of them might be bad enough, but you get all of them.
Yeah.
So a lunchtime special set menu. So on top, they had a number of other sort of matters that the investor was going to require essentially permission in order for the company to go and do these things. So 5,000 limit on indebtedness, so can't take out any credit above 5,000. 10% limit on asset disposal, and then veto rights on any hire with a salary of over £45,000 sterling.
There's a lot to digest there.
Which of these delicious items would you like to dive into first?
So I think if we touch on the the fees aspect of it, because I would say that that's not an outlier in terms of the fundraising round. In terms of funds, when they're investing, will look for fees associated with it, 5-10%, and the maintenance fee of 2%. So I think, unfortunately, that is the sort of world, depending on where you get your money from, like those sorts of fees, unfortunately, are becoming quite commonplace. And again, the more interest you have, the more you've probably got ability to negotiate those down to as much as you can potentially get to. So that's
why do funds charge a fee?
Well, it's so what do they call it? The maintenance.
There's an investment fee of 5%.
Yeah.
And then a 2% annual monitoring fee.
Annual monitoring fee, and do we know if that's over and above any fees for the director that they're appointing as well? Because you could say that monitoring fee is the director fee. But based on what we've got, we'll check on the fees for the director as well, because you do see it that like the monitoring fee is basically how much you're paying for the person or persons to be directors or observers of the business and their time spent going to board meetings, reading board packs, etc. So that, or you might have a monitoring fee, and then on top of that, are potentially paying for any time of the person and their travel expenses, etc. I would like to think the monitoring fee is wrapped up in that.
Me too.
But based on the rest of like how many things there are on that, again, the negotiating power doesn't seem to be with that founder or founders on that one. So again, yeah, I mean 2%, 5%. So that's 7% of the money gone before. And did you say legal fees?
Uncapped legal fees. Yeah.
As a lawyer, that sounds great. All lawyers' fees should be uncapped, as far as I'm concerned. No, I mean, and that's sorry, and again, I'm loving this. That's even if the deal doesn't go ahead.
Yes,
you're still getting an invoice from the lawyers for that.
And so I think one of the really alarming things for me in terms of like engaging with that is any future step in the negotiation where you might want to go back and renegotiate something.
Yeah,
you're racking up
paying for it.
The legal bill.
You'll be paying for it twice on the basis that you're paying for theirs, and also presumably, unless you fancy doing it yourself, I would never suggest that. As a lawyer, of course, I'd say that, but. You'd be then paying for your own, you'd like to think it would be both parties are responsible for their own costs up to signing. And sometimes you'd agree then, okay, on signing, we will, therefore, some of the monies will be deducted at source in essence to cover fees up to whatever that is. Certainly, that's a blank check, right? Uncapped fees. And it's a bit sneaky, isn't it? Because as you say, it puts you off negotiating anything and standing up for yourself because you're paying for it times 2. Yeah,
I don't think I'd like to work with such an investor on an ongoing basis.
It gets you off on the wrong foot, and it's supposed to be a working relationship going forward. You're all going to a common goal, and if you've got that element of distrust or just a bitter taste in your mouth from signing it, it doesn't bode well going forward. And I guess that sometimes the lawyers are blamed for that, right? I'm happy to be, the bad stuff is talked to the lawyers to maintain the relationship between the investors and the founders, because they just talk about all the positive stuff and, the lawyers are being lawyers and, we don't want to sort of worry you with that sort of thing. But this, again, don't know if it was accepted or not, but we haven't even finished it yet. Sorry, what were the other? Yeah, what were the other bits?
So 5,000 limit on indebtedness. So you can't take out any.
So again, just talking about first principles. So the idea of these sort of consent rights and veto rights, the idea, or certainly how I approach it, is the day-to-day running of the business shouldn't mean you picking up the phone to your investor, director, or observer twice a day to say, can we do this? Can we do that? That's not in anyone's interest to do it. If I was acting for the investor, I would be saying, this is we're doing this to overkill. I don't know why you're wanting to do this. Now, the bigger decisions, and, depending on the stage of the company, what you're saying about the salary amount, if it's 3 founders and that's it, and they're about to take on some staff for the first time, then that might be a lower amount than, say, a more advanced company who has already got 5 to 10 employees. And at that point, you want to set the consent right limit at the senior employees that you're taking on, because those are the ones that are going to be the more important. I don't think an investor should be signing off on junior staff every time. It's my own view, and a lot of investors that I work for are of the same. So this sounds like a lot of micromanagement, and is going to just annoy everybody about how many phone calls. So those amounts should be again, depending on what stage they're at, a sensible level. So it's not every time you want to think or do something, you're ringing your investor.
And so I suppose some indication is given of the stage of the company at a post-money valuation, 1.5 million.
Yeah.
So it's relatively early on still, but
but still, those are small numbers. I would
especially
say,
when you're thinking about a tech company today, hiring staff who are going to be adding value to the business. You'd be very hard pressed to find a good developer who will take a salary even at that level.
And I exactly, and I think there was a little bit of a sort of, with the inflationary rates and everything we've had over the last couple of years, there was a bit of a delay in actually the illegal agreements catching that up, because it was based on previous levels of salaries that investors deemed acceptable, and then all of a sudden the feedback was coming back, particularly as you say in the tech side of things. They're like, we're not going to get anyone for this, so unless you want us to be ringing you every time we want to take someone on, this needs to go higher. And you're noticing now that the first drafts of things that come through, the numbers are reactive now to what the inflationary joy that we've had over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Well, as you say, I mean, this investor is going to be creating a miny bureaucracy really for themselves in terms of the number of hires that their portfolio companies are going to want to be making. And
well, yeah,
so
like,
no one's interest.
Yeah, exactly. If they've got 10, 15 companies on the go with all those the same levels.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to be like looking out for new investments and everything, because it's just going to be day-to-day management on your existing one. So again, a lot of these things are just in no one's interest. And, they might say, it's just there day-to-day, actually in reality, it's not going to play out with that. Well, then don't put it in the agreement that we're all about to sign, particularly if I'm paying for your lawyers.
Yes.
Like, have sensible first drafts.
Well, I think that's probably might even be why the lawyers insist on these terms remaining. So they've got to get paid to get the eraser out.
These lawyers, man, I'm telling you, they're no good. They're no good for anyone.
I make no comment.
Good decision.
Okay, I think we're up to voting time now.
Well,
so
I have to remind myself of the one. So
we've got Oddball Alert, got Backseat Founder, got Boardroom Vampire, and Business Butcher.
Okay. I would say based on those levels of things, I'm going to say you've got like a backseat founder, because everything's going to have to be good. So many things are going to be going through them that it seems way overkill. You might disagree.
Yeah, I was
disagree with me.
I was torn between Backseat Founder and Boardroom Vampire because they are going to take a board seat if they're going in.
Oh, sorry. Can I just add one thing? Typical lawyer, and just one more thing. Sorry, but on the director,
fees are not uncapped, by the way. Just so you know.
on the director seat as well, I like to always at least propose it as part of the negotiation that term, the right to appoint a director is set at a threshold amount. So in a future investment round, it's not necessarily entrenched if those investors get diluted to 6%. I'm very always aware of there have been an entrenched right that you can have a director seat for however long, but actually they might be a minute shareholder compared to the future investors coming in. So I always try to raise that, see if you can get if we go under 10%, 7%, whatever it is, that right falls away.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's really interesting. And so that also, I suppose, creates a much easier environment for a new investor coming in who's going to want a board seat.
Yeah.
To be like, well, we've actually established the mechanic by which that occurs.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting idea.
And also it would mean that potentially, if the new investor comes in, they say, well, these guys have got an entrenched right, but they're like a 5% shareholder and we're coming at 15. So we want 2 directors.
Right. And
because it comes about board control as well as just actually being involved in it, and you'll have your shareholder rights or whatever. So all the fun and games that you get involved in these negotiations, but it's always worth thinking, okay, can we set a threshold for this, because in the future we'll thank ourselves for it if we can negotiate it.
I think we need to have a chat about our company sort of articles.
Sure. Anyway, what color are you going for? More importantly,
okay.
The suspense is killing me.
Yeah, sorry. I'm also. I think I'm going to agree. I'm going to
Yeah.
go backseat founder. It's
Yeah.
just gonna. This is going to be such a tax on the business. I don't think it's necessarily going to. I don't think necessarily kills the business. Like 5% fee. I think I've seen plenty
more
of
as well,
those.
Yeah.
2% monetary fee. Seen plenty of that. Requirement for a board seat. All right. I think that's pretty cheeky, but fine.
Yeah.
If you can agree, if you can agree an exit mechanism for them, okay. I think the no cap on legal costs is a bit.
I think that's
messed
great.
up.
I think that's great.
Well, maybe we should review our guests as well.
I could see that, right?
Sorry. I think I agree. I think the salary bit is big depending on where you are. If you're in London, like good luck. Like
Yeah, and the argument being, well, we live in a remote world now, so you should be able to get people from wherever and therefore accept a lower salary, etc. But I don't think that if you actually look at the data on the ground and founders sort of anecdotal evidence of it, salaries are not, they're only going one way at the moment. So yeah, there's a lot going on with that one.
a huge amount.
Yeah, I feel like we could have done the whole thing on just that.
Just that one. Yeah,
But yeah,
fair.
good submission.
A very good submission. So yeah, thank you. And indeed, if you are a founder and you'd like to submit a horror story that you have experienced in your journey, you can submit an anonymous story to us here at the podcast. Contact information will be in the link below. Okay. Final.
Is this
story.
how much maths are involved in this one?
Actually, none.
Oh,
None. So
you're treating me now, aren't you?
going
Yeah,
easy.
nice.
Okay. Not a great story though. Unfortunately for the founder
Okay.
involved. So, founder was approached by an angel investor via an online investor network. After speaking with this investor for a while, things were going well and heading towards an investment. This investor worked for one of the FANGs, and the founder basically had realized through engaging with this prospective investor that they worked in relatively similar spaces and that the prospective investor had an interest in the technology that the founder was building, which is not uncommon. Many of our investors have an active interest in the same sort of space that we're building in.
Yeah.
But the founder then asked that prospective investor for a testimonial for a grant that they were applying for, thinking that it would add weight and credibility. And so the founder went into great detail about the grant that they were applying for. Anyway, so that prospective investor then said he couldn't do that, as in the course of their discussions over time, that prospective investor had built the same product himself at that FANG. So,
Oof.
and it gets worse.
Getting my red one at the ready
Yeah,
here.
I mean,
right?
I agree. It gets worse as well. So,
Good. It's truth. Go on.
that prospective investor had actually found out from Companies House who the existing investors were in that business and had gone and approached them about investing in that new borrowed idea.
Yeah. Wow. Discuss.
Yeah. I mean,
We could have done one on just this one as well on its own. I mean, there's a lot going on. Oh,
yeah, really.
it's painful to hear that, isn't it?
I've gone on one online investment network platform before, and it also had a very mixed experience in terms of sort of people kicking tires and things, and I found that quite frustrating. But nothing on this.
Yeah.
This is. I feel really sorry for the founder, especially the bit about essentially stalking investors.
Yeah. I
and
mean,
trying to tap them up.
where to start on this one? I guess, and this is the same for if you're trying to raise investment or even if you're trying to exit, that there is due diligence on you, and people are going to ask questions about whatever it is you're doing. How does it work? Why is it different to everybody else? And you've obviously got to show that to whoever's doing the due diligence on you. I guess the key is, the secret source stuff is always the balance of when do you talk about the secret source stuff, and is it right towards the end when you're almost about to sign, or are they going to say, well, actually, I need to know all of the stuff before we even get to that thing? So but the NDAs are sort of there for a reason in terms of they give an element of protection to you. It focuses everybody's mind. You still have to sue under them if someone does breach them. But I mean, it sounds like he or she just got hoodwinked on this into just disclosing sort of the whole kit and caboodle.
I think, I mean, just speaking from our perspective, and we, by the way, and maybe I shouldn't be disclosing this. It feels a bit like going to confession.
Does that make me a priest? Go a lawyer slash priest. Yeah, that's fine. Go on. You confess things to lawyers. Lawyers get confessed to. That's fine. Go on. Client privilege and all that. That's fine. Just go on. You're in a safe space.
We don't use NDAs really.
Okay. Yeah.
So and generally, like amongst investors, it's seen as being sort of deleterious to like your ability to consider a deal. And investors that get asked to sign NDAs don't, because they see lots and lots of other companies that might be doing something similar.
Yeah.
And it then becomes very hard to prove actually was there any breach of trust.
Exactly.
Et cetera, et cetera.
I get it.
So yeah.
I mean, I suppose what I would say though is that if it's an individual as opposed to a serial investment fund or whatever, there is a slight difference. I mean, after the fact is easy to say, right? But anyway, sorry. Yeah, I get the what you're saying about the NDAs.
Yeah. So I definitely think that asking for an NDA is a good way to scare off a prospective investor, and also, in theory, anything is copyable. Someone just needs to have the idea and the wherewithal and the means to do so.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it sounds like this prospective investor had all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is resourceful as well. That's an executed plan.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like they just. Well, maybe they were genuinely thought about investing, and then actually they realized I can be a shark here and just start this on my own, or whether they were going fishing on the network. Again, you've probably got more experience of these things than I in terms of being on there, how many sharks there are trying to catch people out.
I mean, I think so. Like from a network perspective, like you always get some like odd messages. I mean, I'm going from one experience, but we're on there for a few months, like very early doors, and that was you get some very unusual messages, like the usual scams on like, we will invest, but you've got to come and meet our person in Monaco or like wherever it is, and they're scamming you that way, getting you invested in the deal happening. I'm not sure the founder can really carry much of the can here without knowing the exact conversations.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah.
Like, I think you will disclose what it is that you're building. Someone who's in theory in a similar space and understands what it is that you're building is more likely to get you excited than it is to sort of scare you off, because if someone understands the problem you're solving, like
they get me, they get it.
Exactly. And you've got that connection because you're attached in theory to solving a problem or wanting to see a problem solved. Yeah. Which is a great sort of tick in terms of prospective investor. I think I don't think the founder can really take much blame.
No. I mean, it's horrible to hear. The interesting, so the investors that had already invested were then going to invest in the duplicate, as it were, the sort of the copycat model, because that's interesting. They've already got skin in the game in one entity. I'm surprised they've just gone, oh yeah, fine, we'll just. I'm not sure how that's actually worked in practice.
Yeah, I think that's really quite interesting as well with the so like he did actually find out previous investors and managed to get a couple to invest in this new venture. So yeah, I think very resourceful, if very unpleasant individual here.
No, yeah. I mean, it just really paints a bleak picture of humankind, doesn't it, when this stuff is going on? But ultimately, that is the world of investment, and that's what's going on. But like you said, if you're doing an investment round, you'll be talking to a lot of investors. Even when you're not doing an investment round, you'll be talking to people who's potentially you want to line up down the line and stuff. So it's you're either actively fundraising or you're preparing for a fundraise. It's probably like the 1 week after you've completed a fundraise, you're not fundraising and your mind then starts working about the next one, right? But in terms of protection, like from the legal perspective, you could sign an end. This is relationships and investors saying, "How dare you? I don't sign NDAs." I get that. It's very hard, but there's nothing much else sort of to legally protect you on that one. That is. yeah, and yeah, what I don't get is the other investors just going, yeah, fine, we'll just go and chuck money into the other one, knowing that presumably they must like, this sounds like a lot like one we've already invested in. Like, I don't understand how that dynamic has happened. And well, I guess what we don't know now is what happened, what has happened. Like, I want to know the end story because, I mean, in terms of what he or she could do, you could try and make a lot of noise to put investors off. If you find out who this copycat has set up their own company, you could try and make some noise, issue a threatening claim against them or whatever. Speak to a lawyer probably about that, I would say. But yeah, that's a really grim story. And I hear it quite a bit with CTOs coming in and wanting to sort of, I'll come and work for 6 months, give me 20% equity of the company, and then after 6 months we'll review it or whatever. And then those sort of, they come in, 6 months go by, they work out everything that's going on, and then they could potentially shoot off with it. It doesn't matter. This, like you said, like anything is copyable if you've got the resources and the knowledge. It is difficult.
If you're bringing someone in on a sort of almost salaried or equity, like a position where there's equity involved, then you can put in place provisions to prevent them from
so you
competing.
If you've got it's talk about founders agreements, and sometimes you have a founders agreement already, but then you're bringing on someone else, CTO, CFO, whatever it is. Either they're having options for shares, which means they don't get any shares on day one, which is probably preferable. Or if you are going to give them any equity, then you've got to have provisions in there to be able to claw it back if they leave. The difficulty is, like I said, if someone comes in with the view of just, actually, I want to get under the hood here and work out what's going on because I think I can take this idea because this founder doesn't know what they're doing, and I'll go off and sell it myself. That's the part of the vetting and due diligence you do on anyone coming in. That's why you ask for references if you can, try and vet whoever's coming in. But yeah, I mean, the again, we could do a separate podcast on what to do to protect yourself in terms of equity when bringing people into the business. There's a lot that goes into it, and sadly, people just sort of agree it, or they'll agree, a very broad sort of line in their employment agreement will give you, up to 10% of their equity or whatever. And that, as a lawyer, I hate to see, because it's 10% of equity when, and what governs it. Have you got provisions around it? And and I get it, because at the start, you don't have the budget for legal fees. You don't have the budget to, spend money to get everything right. But you do need to know that actually some things, when it comes to equity, it is worth spending the time and money on it if you can, or trying to agree some sort of repayment plan with your lawyer or whatever it is, because if you just go into it blindly, more often than not, it's going to trip you up down the line, and you've given away more equity than you were anticipating.
We were lucky, I think, in that we had a founders agreement from day one, and that really helped govern. And we started off as 3 co-founders in ShipShape, and 1 left after 6 months. And we thankfully had an agreement that actually it made it quite an amicable parting of ways, rather than one that could have gotten, in theory, like quite ugly quite quickly, because it's relatively even splits to start with, in theory, on the equity. So I mean, I'm just really sorry for this founder. It sounds really horrible.
That's really, really tough. But like I said, there are lessons. But again, it's a difficult one. Like, doing it again, how many things would you do differently? It's different. It's difficult.
I could see myself walking right the way through this, even now, probably, and thinking, actually, what, this person gives us a really solid chance of getting additional funding that's non-dilutive into the business, because that testimonial would count for so much. So I think that this is just down to a bad apple, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, they are.
There are many.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how well. They didn't invest, and the terms weren't there, but evidently what they're trying to do was
the business has been butchered. So I think, sort of from a lawyers like definitions, I would say that this is a worked example, going full circle there on you. That would be. Unfortunately, I feel bad for I feel bad for you making light of it, but that I feel like the business has well and truly been butchered there.
Yeah, that sounds pretty terrible, and also, given it's anonymized, don't know the source of this, or indeed what happened. But if you would like us to pick apart your founder story, where you've had bad experiences with investors, please do get in touch and let us know. Okay, I think we're there, but would love for people to know again who you are, what it is that you do, and can you give us a little sort of roundup?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a corporate partner at Acuity Law. I lead the startups team. So I have predominantly worked in London for most of my career, but I've moved back home to Wales the last 18 months, and that's how I ended up joining Acuity. So I have acted on investment side, on founder side. We also have a startups team, so that if you have an employment-related question or IP-related question, I'm not having a stab at it. It's best if you go speak to someone who's actually specialist in it.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great having you.